Thank you for inviting me to talk to Isaac. Even so, we are here in Hong Kong, as you may know, Isaac lives in Germany, and I'm German, as you can tell by my accent. And so we will also, fortunately, unfortunately, talk about a few words that are quite German, but I felt are quite useful to think about Isaac's work and his relationship to different works. And one work actually is also on the slideshow, which for me is one of the most powerful ones he's ever done, which was the work where he dated a guy in Buchenwald, which is an early work. It's 2013, but it's also one, I think, for me, one of the most powerful works, because just the idea to go on a date in Buchenwald, and if you ever want to be on the most terrible place on earth, and a place that makes you really feel just outrageous and terrible and sick, you go to a German concentration camp, because there's nothing more depressing than these places. And then the idea to kind of go there on a date and then kiss one, I think that has also to do a lot with falling and letting oneself fall and letting oneself go. It is violent, but also on the other side, quite romantic idea. And I think that's kind of where a lot of Isaac's works oscillates in between. But I think talking about different works, we can just go through the different works in the show, which are also connect to a lot of these ideas. But let's start with the first one, Falling Carefully, Care, which the first, and it's kind of changing, the three words. I'm sure you saw them in both languages, in Chinese and in German. But the first thing one thinks about, if you know a little bit about art history and so on, is Bruce Nauman, obviously, who is an conceptual artist in the 60s. Pili made a wonderful show here at Daegun about the works just a year ago. But it brings me to the beginning. Maybe, Isaac, you can talk a little bit about the people that are interesting for you, the other artists, performative artists, video artists. I think a lot of that starts in the 1960s and was quite influential for you.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Tobias, for your introduction and also your sharing. When it comes to artists, there are so many artists, and I think I definitely won't be able to list everyone here. But of course, like during my studies, like there are artists such as like Joseph Beuys or Marina Abramovic, and there are Yoko Ono or like Song Dong, and or Santiago Sierra. Like many different artists, they use not only performance but mixed media to work on, sometimes in a more conceptual framework, but challenging certain kinds of normative behavior or just norms in general. So these are very much like the beginning, I would say, like from my background. Yeah.
But they're all performance artists, or we would call them artists that did performance and then managed to move these performances into an art space, into museum space, which in the 60s was not normal. Performances would happen in theaters, in Judson Church, in different other places. So what did you learn from these artists, how to use performance and bringing performance into the art space?
I think very much of challenging the norms, like what kind of meanings or ideas that are given. Like when we see things, we actually know sometimes. Okay, I know this meaning, but then how to or we are so used to move like sit like this or walk like this, then we call it, oh, this is normal. Or like we use certain things with a certain ways, and that's what I meant, the norm or the normative. But when it comes to performance, or when it comes to coming to a gallery space or public spaces, like how the body would move differently, so that we say, oh, that might be a performance. Or sometimes I also look at the idea of impossible performance, that sometimes the performance is not only limiting to the body, but then how, like let's say Rebecca Hahn, how she's using the extension of the body to do something that the body normally cannot do, or even like Joseph Beuys looking at this as idea of social sculpture and believing that everyone is the artist and how art has the power to shape the society.
Yeah, art as art and the object about I mean, Beuys thought it was a left power to change society. One can argue that, but it's also this repeat. I think then with that repeat comes this idea, this Judith Butler idea of performativity, right? We are basically, things are not given, but by performing certain acts over and over again, they define things like gender, or mostly gender. She talks about. It came up at probably the same time, and I wonder if that was something. If you look around on your research on the body, which you did in the last few years, is that something also as a queer person that you were interested in?
I feel like it's always like this idea of queering the, let's say, the hierarchy of meanings, or like what is like what I mentioned before, that in a way we're kind of like trapped with a normative body. Like as you mentioned, of course we will then look at Judy Butler, the performativity, how the body is like very strongly gendered, and not only the body but the space, or even our language, or like things that we do, we use, we behave. And that's why I think, and like maybe I won't say that. I mean, there are some works, as you mentioned, with I Dated a Guy in Buchenwald is very much of a work about queerness, and paying also like respecting the people who unfortunately passed away in the concentration camp, including, of course, the homosexuals, which were persecuted and executed, among many others. But I think like by queering like all this idea of, let's say, given meanings, like in space, it can be space, body, objects. Then I found sometimes the resistance, or I find maybe as a way to respond to this idea of, let's say, powerlessness when confronting with things that I feel like it's not that we just change it, then we change it, but we can reimagine it, and
But this idea of reimagining of history, of reading history differently, also comes out in the next works, in Missing Spaces, where you basically went around Hong Kong and you've tried to find bullet holes left over from the Japanese occupation. You found them, then you maybe you explain yourself how you made them. Maybe it's you know much better how you made them. Yeah.
Sure. Actually, I have been collecting all these bullet holes. Like I go to the mountains, or like one of the more famous one is Stephen from HSBC, that you see so in front of HSBC building, you have these two famous lions on the left. When you go visit, like actually this is a wounded lion, and like there are lots of like bullet holes coming from the Battle of Hong Kong, and then you can. So what I did, I went there and then used clay to capture the shape of the wound, and then transform it into glass. So here in the space, you can see that the glass is like seated on the mirror, and then on top you also have a layer of glass sheets that you see the etching of the GPS number, where you can find this particular bullet hole. What interests me a lot is also let's say how the glass perform. I was so drawn to glass, maybe it's because of like I would say the performativity of the glass, that it always being perceived very fragile, but at the same time in this particular work, when it's so thick, let's say the glass is very solid and thick, then it feels safe, or like you don't think that it would just like someone would break it immediately. But then like in this particular sense, that is also a transformation from the fire, the violence of the gunfire shooting on the wall, and making the bullet holes very big. That's why you have more safety in the glass, like between the safety and the violence, like that.
But then you introduce an idea of fragility into it, right? By putting that other flat flat piece of glass on top of it, which makes it, I mean, you almost don't dare to even look at it, right? It's so fragile, it's such an equilibrium of doing that.
Yeah. So like it's also very much like remember we talked about it as a bit like falling carefully.
Yes.
Like very carefully, also like giving the audience like this feeling, like the bodily, like you can feel like this could be uncomfort. Like is it gonna like fall or not? But it fell like very accurately, but maybe not. And that's also like knowing that in the end is still a very fragile issue that we're looking at, not only back in the time in Hong Kong during the Second World War, but also nowadays in our contemporary world. Yeah.
But there is, I mean, with missing spaces, but also with Buchenwald and so on, there's this interest in history, in how do we preserve history and how do we use very individual things like a bullet hole into a wider context. I think it's not, that work for me is not only about Hong Kong. You find, I mean, especially living in Berlin, you still find these bullet holes, and you find them in many other places. Can you explain how you link the idea of something local to a more global context?
Well, what I found interesting is that if you look at like the first time when I did this work, it's very interesting. Now it's going back to like 10 years ago, actually 11, like 2014. I started a performance that I'm using my hand touching a wall full of bullet holes in Sarajevo. So it was like in Bosnia that I visited, and it was a very shocking view of seeing so many bullet holes in the public space. And later, in 2000, I mean, that kind of like seated in my mind like for a very long time, many years, that I've been thinking about this form and the missing space of this negative form of it. Then later in Berlin in 2019, then I started this work of like bullet holes, glass sculpture, and collecting bullet holes in Berlin where I live. And from there, I also travel now, like doing the same series in Hong Kong. What I found interesting is that they look so similar. Like they are all so unique. They all have like very particular form. Like some people say that it looks like an organ. Some people say that it looks like eyes. Some people say it looks like so many different things. But they are still connected. So what I have been looking for, I think, not only in this particular work and in many other works, is to look for the commonness or what we share. And that is so far away in Berlin or in Sarajevo, but we have similar wounds. And what does that mean to us here today to look at like traces of the war, and also the fact that we're living now in a world of wars? That how should we stand, and what is our position, and what is our connection to the world, and how would we be able to also share the idea of solidarity to find something common between us people to support each other. So I think it's very much present when it comes to that.
And this, I think that moves us also to the press marks, right? Where you use, and you see it in the slideshow, you use images we all, or most of us, remember. In these two cases, one is of a girl crying when Queen Elizabeth died a few years ago. The other one is Lady Di picking up a stick of an older man. Also works kind of compassion, of sympathy, but also of, also quite strong political, some of them quite strong political messages. Can you talk a little bit how you do, because it's quite, how you do these freezing works? I mean, there are like 10 or 12 different pieces of glass that create basically an image. How you do them, but also or which kind of images you select for these works.
Sometimes I feel like maybe I talk about the glass first, like so it's basically capturing the breath marks on glass and making this very fleeting phenomena, like transforming it into something permanent. And it starts from a very simple, to another work or whatnot. I won't be talking too much about that. It will be very long. But it started more like this very simple questions of how can I keep, in a way, how can I keep this like ephemeral phenomena? Like, how can I do that? And also the fact that I won't be able to do that in real life. When I breathe onto a glass, then it disappears. So then I then look at the material and focusing on glass etching, and the result is actually looking very much like breath marks. that becomes the medium and the way that I wanted to do it. And in terms of the motives, I oftentimes look at research and look at different images, how we perceive it, and in a way, it's hard to tell. I always just say that I found it so interesting. Like, let's say the crying girl in front of the British Council, crying so excessively, or holding the picture of Queen Elizabeth. And some of the slideshow, you can also see it. And then people criticizing her, okay, you have never really lived during the colonial time. Why are you so sad? And then people were oh yeah, she's faking it. There's so many different comments on that. But what I found interesting is that no one really knows what she's crying for. And at the same time, this idea of why would a young girl crying for a time that she have never lived through? And when it comes to Princess Diana, is very much of an icon growing up in Hong Kong. She represents so much of the colonial power, but at the same time the compassion or the resistance against the royal family. So she's an icon, and she visited Hong Kong, and someone dropped the walking stick, and she was holding, helping out. She bowed a little bit, like this gesture of bowing somehow really caught me. And at the same time, how this compassion also connected to the colonial power, which is, let's say, when we talk about colonial studies, is very much defined. And so somehow all these also I question this collective memory, what we are remembering and what we are or what kind of fleeting moment or memories that could be crystallized in the form of the work that we see here.
But all these works are about Hong Kong and play with the history. Oh, what is happening here? All these. I take this one. Okay. Yes. No, that doesn't help you. All these works are about Hong Kong and the history of Hong Kong, and how do we perceive Hong Kong at this moment. And I think that is why why these other the next works. Oh, is that working? Okay. The touched works, which are the three works that are back here, are so important, because it's something you and many other people have been very touched by, which is that film Rouge. Just for people like me who didn't know about the Rouge, it is actually a film done by Stanley Kwan, which was a queer director, but it had Anita Mui and Leslie Cheung in it. Both committed suicide later. So, but it is a film about a couple that falls in love, but then a love that basically couldn't develop in a marriage, so they wanted to poison themselves with opium. One died, obviously the woman. The man survived, and she comes back 50 years later looking for him. The film is written shortly after the Sino-British Declaration, so it has a very political undertone, has also a very gender political undertone. But again, the question is, why exactly that film, and how do you make that selection of that film? Yeah, let's maybe start with that.
Sure. Actually, I think you have already made a lot of points, one of the reasons why I was so interested in this film, the fact that it was made after this the Sino-British Joint Declaration deciding the future of Hong Kong. And also the fact that they use opium, they consume opium to commit suicide. What interests me here is that actually opium is very much the substance that created Hong Kong in a way, or like representing the birth of Hong Kong. That is already under like unfair treaties that led us to, let's say, to see that in 1930s that people are using it, like or like they how they depict it in the film. And at the same time, it's very much of like this imaginations of what 50 years means. Like what could happen within this 50 years, or what could happen after this 50 years. In that particular film, you see that in the end she found Leslie Chun, like in the movie, but he wanted to be an actor, he wanted to perform, but then he ended up not being someone who is like so extraordinary, but he was having a very promising future. And so that's like how the director look at it. In my work, I particularly like chose certain moments, such as, for example, when Anita Mui, she was cross-dressing, like becoming like singing. She was singing, becoming like performing as a man. Or when they're consuming the opium. In the blue one, you also see that they're embracing after they consume the opium, looking at the mirror, or even just like the peeling the orange, like right here, like talking about the care for the mother, also for the wife. And all these like moments, how like they are in a way romantic, but at the same time heavily connected to the history of Hong Kong. And so that somehow led me to this work.
And how did you actually do them? I mean, how are they produced? How did you make the images?
Sure. So I'm of course like looking at the movie stills. Like some of them were also shown here, and then I'm using my body imprints, like different, like that's why it's called touched. It's about like how the body imprints could create different shapes, and these shapes, when they are put together, they compose an image and responding to like the reference photo that a reference still that we see. And somehow I think it has a lot for me to deal with memories and how sometimes blurry memories are. And at the same time, also the idea of like the similarities, or like not sure that if it's like that or not. So somehow, like when you look at it, it's a little bit like dreamy, like oh, maybe these are two people. Like my mother was just saying that it was two people. My brother was saying it's only one person here. Yeah. But
that kind of movie and also these work, for me they have to do a lot also with trauma, with trauma, but also with the idea of falling, but also like Rouge as a movie with coming out on the other end, right? I mean, there's this almost famous for you incident where you were attacked in Berlin Mitte at a very important street under den Linden, which was formerly known as by another name, Street of the 17th June. Again, a historic place, and you got in a not even an argument. You talked to somebody, he attacked you with a beer bottle, and then you had to go to the hospital. There's a photo of that. But then what I'm interested in, and I think that's also what we see in a lot of your works, that you come out as, on the one side, a different person, but you come out as almost, I wouldn't say better, maybe we just keep it at a different person. There's kind of a metamorphosis there. There's a change in you as an artist, you as a person, that I think has also is the same we see at Rouge, where people come out differently, and a development, but this development is almost positive.
I actually I think in my works you see things sometimes could be like what you said, could be trauma, it could be historical wounds. And I think in my work it's in a way both, like to a point, not neglecting the fact that like there is a trauma, there is like something that happened, but at the same time, it's very much like the title of this exhibition in English, we call it carefully. Carefully is an adverb that can shape different verbs, different action, different performance, or different ways of doing things. Or so that's like carefully just one word, and that can be put onto many different things. It could be like, okay, someone fall, but then what if they fall carefully? Or if someone like got attacked, can they be attacked carefully? So like it's like using this notion, one could see that as positive, but at the same time not neglecting the fact that it's still happening. Yeah, like these both things.
So there are these two sides of this
Yeah.
of this project, which I think we see in a lot of your works, and it's like I'm maybe talk first about I want to end with that, but first about tomorrow. You actually have that performance at the National Gallery, which if you have not been to Berlin, is like after the war, the Germans built that amazing monument of a museum by Mies van der Rohe, which is completely empty it is basically an empty place on the first floor, and all the art and so on is in the cellar, but it's one of the most modernistic buildings, and it was built right on the border to East Germany, so the East Germans could see it, and there was kind of almost a competition between the two Germanys, two Berlins at that time, who could be the more modern country. But what is interesting is that this building, very much different to, say, the bullet holes or Buchenwald and so on, has actually a lot of positive connotations. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that performance in that very differently connotated environment than the other works.
I would say that like I study in Germany, and somehow we discuss a little bit of like German words that really give like, I mean, if some of you speak German, you might know like the word that you mentioned of
Vergangenheitsbewältigung. Vergangenheitsbewältigung is very important for us Germans, because after the horrors of the war, where Germany killed 9 million Jews and started a horrific war, this country had to come to its own terms and had to work their way out, and there are basically two ways to go on after something very badly happened. The one way is you just forget it and you move on and you never talk about it, and you never are even allowed to talk about it, and dictatorships like to do it that way. The Germans, being very democratic and very much full in with everything, just had to talk. I mean, when I grew up in Germany, we talked permanently about that, and it was permanently discussed how terrible it is and how bad this German character was and what we can do to deal with it. So the dealing with your past, which we call Vergangenheitsbewältigung, and that's why there are still these concentration camps, right? They're still there to be visited and so on. It's so much in our generation, but I also see it, and that's, for me, it's interesting, you having studied in Weimar, which is an old German, I mean, it's a town of Goethe and Schiller and so on. Yeah. It's very much in your work as well.
Yeah, it's like that's very much like the experience living in Germany, how Germans are looking at the past, how to deal with it. Like when you look at a public space, it's not only about just like, oh, it looks good or not, but it's about a story. It's about like the theory behind, maybe the philosophy, as you said, with the Neue National Gallery, like with Mies van der Rohe, is this theory of the space, creating the space, wanting to be democratic, wanting to be transparent in comparison, let's say, to the Nazi regime. And at the same time, like the museum has experienced, like let's say, the degenerate art, that many arts are being censored. And so like the architecture wants it to be open with everything glass. And somehow like, I think these are always taken into account in my work let's say because one of the things is because I studied there, I lived there. That's also how it shaped my practice. And at the same time, I think context is to me very important, like when it comes to many different works. So with the performance tomorrow in particular, I'm inviting hopefully 100 people like standing in front of like a 50 meters long of the museum, and behind the glass, like the whole wall, let's say wall of the museum actually is a window, and then they will adjust their heights to match the same height to create a horizon. Yeah.
Too bad we can't be in Berlin tomorrow. But that idea of Vergangenheitsbewältigung also brings us right to that work, which first of all looks like, it's a group of people mourning, and it's your collaborator Anna, what's her name? Anna?
Dagmar Einer.
Dagmar Einer, working with this group of people to overcome their mourning. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is in that wonderful church, which is also, as you see, it's a ruin, and it's a ruin because Berlin was heavily bombed. In that time, the Germans kept it. However, that work goes back to a play, we see it here, to a work by Käthe Kollwitz, Die Mutter, Die Mütter, in plural it is actually. Can you talk a little bit about the connection between the Käthe Kollwitz work and this work? Which was, when I saw this work where did we see it? In Bangkok the first time, I immediately remembered that Käthe Kollwitz work, so it's very clear, I think.
Yeah, so Käthe Kollwitz is a German artist. She has a lot of wood print sculpture, and she's very important in Germany, and also worldwide. Let's say in China too. Like she has influence like a really big generation of artists on woodcuts. And her works, like for example here, we also see her works, Mother with Her Dead Son. And with this particular work, Die Mütter, the mothers, actually there's a wood print of hers showing a group of mothers hugging, like a collective hug, and protecting the children in her like wood print series called War series. And in this series, she depicts like many women and children. And her own story is also that she lost her son in the First World War, and since then, I think a lot of her works are also like about anti-war. And in this particular work here, you see a group of people hugging, of course, referencing also this work, the mothers. And we are singing different songs like funeral songs or lullabies while turning in a circle. And it's a 2-channel video because like from one side you see the front, from the other side you see the back. So it's like kind of like the way how it works. And the music, as you already have mentioned, I work with Dagmar Einer. She has been working in Munich supporting people who are going through mourning, and to use singing and music to help them express their emotions. So that was like in the lyrics, there are many different lyrics, like some of them are like different languages like Sanskrit or German or English, and different languages that are also connected to her practice.
But it is also this idea of supporting as a group of mourning, which brings us maybe to your Venice work, which was whoever has had the luck to be in Venice last year, it was Falling Reversely, it was called. It was a huge video installation and the performance was actually, the performance was staged at the beginning and at the end of the biennial. And you had people basically falling but being caught. So this again, that relationship between letting yourself go, fall, but being secured by another, being secured by a different group of people. Is that something? It seems like something that is a lot of this support by others. It seems to be very important in most of your works.
I think so, like because like let's say with this particular work, Falling Reversely, it happens during also like the COVID-19 when many of my friends living in in Europe or in America, we share our stories, like how we were attacked in public space, and so we have to come together. We have to, and that's why also you see now, let's say maybe more in the U.S., more API communities that are formed to support Asian diaspora, and so in a way, it's because something happens that. And for me, the way is like we need to come together to support each other. And in this falling reversely work, the idea is also very much from the falling carefully. So like how we can fall reversely by carefully supporting each other. Like, or we cannot reverse the movement of falling in general when it happens very fast, but how about we slow it down, or we reverse it back by like pushing someone back like that. So that is also, again, this imagination of what is actually possible in art too.
Yeah, that relates to this idea of the body of an object, and basically also, and somehow we move between Joseph Beuys and rational aesthetics, right? Where the body becomes, or the artwork becomes something much more than just an artwork. It becomes almost a service, something that gives people some confidence, some way of reliance, something much more than you normally would have gotten from an artwork in former times.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think what Beuys believes is also like how our everyday life, and it could be objects, it can be movement, and how it becomes actions, and it will also shape something different. So I would say or call action. So yes. Means like it means something when it comes to action. Yeah.
And I think that's why these or your exhibitions, but also of some of your colleagues, are so powerful also for a younger generation, because they directly interfere or interrelate to everyday life and to everyday experiences.
Yeah, I think with many, especially this show, and it has a lot with also the growing up here in Hong Kong, and at the same time, what I have experienced, bridging my experience, living in Berlin. Yeah.
With these words, maybe we stop that here. What do we have back? Sure. Yeah, that's good. Bullet holes look good. Are there any questions in the audience? Please, somebody has to start, because that's also kind of a performance every time in Hong Kong. Nobody wants to start. Any questions? No? That's all. Oh, thank you. Can I? Oh, you got one. You get one. Yeah.
Hi, Isaac and Tobias. Great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm very interested in your reading of the body as an object, but also a proxy for trauma and healing. And I'm curious, as I guess from Hong Kong, living in Berlin, and probably elsewhere, do you feel like language has shaped the way you read the body? And if living in Hong Kong versus living in Berlin has kind of created different moments in your exploration?
That's so interesting, because we were just talking about the word tenderness, in German, maybe
in German it's Zärtlichkeit,
yeah.
But it's more, it's a little bit like gemütlich. It's not just coziness. It's much more. Zärtlichkeit is much more personal. It's much more interrelated
also
than tenderness.
Or?
Yeah, and much more physical. Yes,
yeah.
But yeah.
So I find it interesting when you mention language. Is words are so different. How tenderness is connected to, let's say, it could be a movement, it could be a gesture, and it can be in English maybe we think of kinship, or but then it's also different. So by being exposed to different, let's say more European countries and working there, somehow it's definitely there's this, different stimulations, or helping me to look at all these connotations very differently. And when it comes to healing and when it comes to trauma, I feel like it's like I remember that we also like for this particular performance, like the Mutter, the mothers, we during Berlin Art Week, it was 3 years ago, we were just singing in public space for a few hours, and there was someone who was crying for 3 hours. And then after that, he went to Dagmar. Dagmar is the woman, the music director. She has composed many songs, and went to her and say how he was so healed, or like how he can like express his emotions, and he was very touched. I found it interesting that, of course, some people maybe just like come and then the work doesn't connect to them, then they walk away. It happens to me too, but there are really sometimes like art would be a way for people to go through like their personal experience, and that's also like the beautiful part of it. Yeah.
It is quite interesting. I never realized it, but these things like tenderness, empathy, and so on, these words are very difficult to translate. There is no, I mean, like for empathy, there's no direct German translation, and so it's funny that these words are so special in every language that they cannot just be, you know, it's not like a class is something else. It's a very, very fragile thing to translate and work with these words. Talking words, any other questions? No? One and only? Oh, there's one in the background, yay. Then we maybe take that as last. We have to wrap it up after that.
Hi, thank you so much. Sorry I'm a little bit late, so I hope my question is not asking about something that you already covered, but I'm really curious in how you work with your dancers, because like the topics you deal with are very, in a way, universal, but also personal, and also maybe also relating to the Hong Kong context in some of them. And just wondering how you work with like performers who come from a different background, multiracial background, like how do you work with these bodies? Like, yeah, so that's the question. Thank you.
To be honest, thank you for the questions. Like, to be honest, I think it's important to have fun. I mean, of course, like when we do the work, when we perform, we are very professional and serious about that. And I always tell the performers or like singers, actors I work with, or dancers, that it's important that you are there and you give your concentration, and you like by just doing that, it changed totally already many things. And but I would also say that I'm a bit different from, let's say, some people would think, oh, are you a choreographer or not? Like because I heard a lot from dancers that I work very differently than let's say a choreographer. For me, it's more like about communication and talking about learning from each other. And I have an image sometimes. I said, oh, I'll try this out, and can we try it out? And then we're all laughing at it because it doesn't work, or like it just doesn't look good, or it just looks too funny. Then we change that, or like they will suggest, like dancers, they know very well their body, and I'm not coming from a dance background, so I'm very much learning from the dancers, and telling me how we can do it in a better way. But yeah, again, I think it's more like everyone coming together. It feels like also like creating a social space as well. Yeah.
So, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Isaac. Thanks to the whole team of Blindspot.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody staying for 45 minutes with us. Yeah, it's a beautiful exhibition, and please take the time to enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.